I miss you, my friend. Ow.
Hey folks, I have something to share that I'm really happy to be given the permission to share this. You know, it's a long time coming. I've waited years for this eyewitness account to speak up. So James Bartley, he runs a channel called The Cosmic Switchboard. He's given me permission to post this. It's just the audio portion. He does have video with it as well on his own channel. So I'll leave a link to his channel in the description. I'll pin it at the top of the comments as well. So this is a interview with James and Sonia Zohar. Sonia, some of you, I'm sure, have seen her interview on the Flash of Beauty stuff, the podcast there. That was more recently posted. And, you know, Sonia's a very intelligent woman, you know, a good friend of mine that I had invited down here to Ontario. She was living out in California at the time. This is back in October 2015. We'd gone out a couple times into this area, which she'll describe, you know, some of the activity. So she will share some of her experiences that, you know, we had together while we were, you know, in Neff's area, both camping in a tent and also I had rented a cottage for a week. So there's an incident that happened at the cottage that I'll mention because, you know, she wasn't there for this part, but I had left the cottage. I'd gone walking up the driveway. It was late, you know, late at night, and it was all surrounded by woods. It was dead still night. This was in October 2015, and I'd walked up the driveway, and I got to the end of the driveway, and I had laid down on the road on the gravel because my back. So I laid down on my back. My back was sore. And as soon as I did that, almost immediately, a footstep came down clearly on the gravel, stepped on the rocks, clearly heard it. It was right there, like literally right behind my head, inches away, if that. So I had, you know, I was comfortable with it because I've been doing this for a while at that point. You know, I trusted the situation, still do. And so I sat up, you know, gave a soft chuckle, and, you know, it's like, hold on, I'll be right back. That's when I walked back to the cottage, and I said, come on, Sonia, we got Sasquatch. And that's when we grabbed a blanket, went back to that spot, sat down, and it was within, I don't know, a few short minutes that we got this bluff charge. You know, it was one of the youngsters messing with us, right? And it's a dead still night, right? It's literally so quiet, you can hear pin drop. There's a lot of nights up there like that. And this charge started at a distance, but it moved up on us so fast. I remember I was, you know, sitting on the ground, and I just turned towards it too late. Moved up on us so fast, I didn't even have time to turn my body before he or she reached us. And, you know, I remember my heart skipping a beat because I had this very brief moment thinking we were being charged at by a bear. You know, that's the size it sounded. You know, Sonia has a description for that. So it was after that we had activity follow us back to the cottage, basically, I think, to listen to our conversation. So we had activity follow us indoors. You know, call it whatever you want, paranormal. You know, I use the term paranormal and interdimensional often. I know she can't stand those words, basically. Doesn't like them very much, but, you know, for whatever, lack of a better term, I use the term interdimensional because I know Sasquatch, there are no walls with them. They can move inanimate objects through inanimate objects, which I've had numerous incidents proving to me. You know, activity has followed me, which I think they find us through consciousness. Activity has shown up regardless of where I've lived. I've even had it happen in my vehicle where I've captured a vocalization on my dash cam on the audio portion inside the vehicle. You know, Dwayne and I were driving a back road at one point, and and this voice made a sound. It wasn't us, right? And we've had activity happen in the vehicle on a few occasions, and so I've learned they can go wherever they want, wherever they choose. And I've had activity happen indoors at home, even vocalizations. A lot of the activity, much of the activity on location is indoors, which includes vocals and physical contact, many apports, written communication. It's very well developed at this point, right? But it still proves to me just how elusive they are. I still barely had a visual. So anyways, I'd even gone to California at one point, to visit Sonia, and we went and did some camping. And I remember we went down into this valley in Mendocino County, Mendocino area. It was a national forest there. I remember it was so dry, it was scary dry, that I was thinking, this place, if somebody lit a match, we were done. We couldn't get out of there. It was that dry. But there was nobody else there. It was just us, right? I remember that night in the tent, I got woken up, and it was dead still, like so silent. And I was running audio outside the tent, and I remember I got woken up by this telepathic snarl that was so scary. Didn't sound Sasquatch. It was so scary sounding, but what was weird was I wasn't frightened. I woke up thinking, oh, right on, it's going to be on the audio. And it wasn't. That's when I realized the clarity of it. It was telepathic. So something didn't like me or want me there or something, I don't know. That's all it was that happened, thankfully. And I remember when we were leaving, we were parked on this road, that drive up this bit of an incline to get out of the park. And we were, I don't know, maybe we were 30-40 yards from the vehicle, and we both heard a clear wood knock. Before we went there, though, there was we went by this river, and we're looking along the river banks for footprints, and I come across this trackway of young, I'm convinced they were Sasquatch prints. It's in a tightrope walk. Excuse me. And there's about a 4-foot length of stick or tree limb pushed into the sand right next to them. And I photographed that, and then we had found some other prints that I'm convinced were Sasquatch. Looking at them, I still am. Around this fire pit, Sonia wasn't convinced because people go there, right? And people will wear their bare feet, but just the shape of them and all that, and some were really stocky and wide, and anyways, the prints that with the tree limb beside it. So I photographed that, and then we left, and we came back there on the way back and stopped there the next day. And I walked up to that. There was nobody there in that area when we got there, both times. And I had walked back up to that same little stretch of footprints in the sand. And that stick had been picked up and placed on the other side of the prints. Just an odd thing to do, pick that up out of the sand and just move it over a few inches on the other side of the prints. That is Sasquatch behavior. That is something they would do. That told me, we were being watched. I remember I pointed my, I was riding shotgun there, and I had pointed my video camera out the window at one point, and I caught something strange. This dark shadow movement. While we were driving, right? That, hey, I don't think it was just, it seems odd to me anyways. I had posted this long ago in my videos. But anyway, so, we had activity going on. And then she came here and had activity happening. We had activity going on here. So, there's incident, stuff that happened while we tented it. And then there was another, stuff happening while we had rented the cottage. There was some things that I witnessed that Sonia didn't, like a small orb, a very small orb. I was walking behind her. It was, it was at night. We were on this gravel road, and I noticed a small, little tiny point of light, this really small orb, about a foot behind her neck, following her. It was brief, but I mentioned it to her, and then I'd asked to see an orb at one point, and it happened basically in front of us, up maybe about 10, 12 feet up. It was just a split second, like kind of like a boomerang trajectory, and it showed up, where I was looking. She didn't see that either. There was a few things that happened, that I witnessed that she didn't. But anyways, this is her eyewitness account. I've cut some of this stuff out that's not as relevant to this situation that I'm talking about. But again, I appreciate the from James and both Sonia and James to give me the permission to post this. And this is just more validation to support what I've put out there for years. I get called hoaxer all the time, and I'm used to it. But it's a shame, that some people can't see past, whatever their thought process. This subject, what do we truly know about Sasquatch? You got to keep an open mind, man. They are capable of things that we do not understand. They are advanced in their consciousness and their understanding of energy. I've basically coined the term energy masters of energy. Been berated for that too by I won't mention his name. Anyways, we are slowly getting to the point where people are realizing that this stuff's true, man. Sasquatch, they have abilities. They are people. They have names, like you and I and everybody else. They have names. They have families. They have children. They're not demons. Demons don't have families and children. And so enjoy this. And like I said, there's no visual with this. I'll put the links to James' is that a Cosmic Switchboard channel in the description, and pin it at the top of the comments, as I mentioned. So go visit his channel. He's a good man, and fighting the good fight, like some of us are. So I appreciate your support, and have yourself an awesome day.
Hello again, everybody. This is James Bartley, and you're watching and listening to the Cosmic Switchboard Show. Today, our very special guest is Sonia Zohar. Sonia Zohar is an empath and an anomalous researcher primarily focused on the being known as Sasquatch due to an encounter she had in Montana in 2012. Currently, she lives in Washington State, where she teaches primary education and in her spare time traverses unabated into the depths of the wilderness to observe, communicate, and habituate Sasquatch. She has worked with Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, Dr. John Bindernagel, Les Stroud of Survivorman, and Dr. Susan McDonald over the last 7 years, and has experienced firsthand all purported Sasquatch phenomena. She's written a children's book, currently working on a non-fictional book on the topic, and speaks publicly when given the opportunity. So without any further ado, Sonia Zohar, welcome to the Cosmic Switchboard Show.
Good morning, James. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Likewise. The field of Sasquatch research has reached new horizons and has opened up new vistas to those with the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Yourself and your colleague Mike Patterson, who I've had on the show, and others out there, have done their level best to take this research into the next level where it needs to go. But before we get to that point, I'd like you to tell our audience a bit about yourself and how you got into Sasquatch work, research, and the milestones that led you to this point.
Well, it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey. I can't thank the journey and the process enough. But I didn't start out a believer. I actually didn't believe in Bigfoot. I thought Bigfoot was the jackalope of the Pacific Northwest. I thought it was something that, a roadside kind of gig and gag, and that people had a lot of fun with and made toys and dolls with. And then I was hiking in Lewis and Clark National Park, around that area, in the area of Montana, and something followed me for about 4 days. And something followed me that sounded like a gorilla. So I was open to the possibility that someone's designer gorilla had gotten loose in the forest and was following me. However, I say that in jokingly because there were a couple of things that happened from that very first encounter that I knew that it was different, whatever it was. But I will say it did sound like a gorilla. It made noises, vocalizations, similar to a gorilla. It was large. It followed me. I never actually saw it. But it made noises, broke sticks around me, and then it actually vocalized in a very gorilla-like sounding vocalization. And the odd thing about it, like I said, I knew from the beginning that what I was experiencing was different, because when I left, I had my very first, what I'd call Sasquatch encounter of the phenomena. And one of the phenomena that you encounter when you encounter Sasquatch are what they call out of context emotions. And I knew that as I was driving away from the campsite, I started to feel this unbearable sadness, and it was consuming. And, and I'm privy to my own emotions. I'm not like, I won't hide my tears or anything like that. I don't care. You have your emotion, you have emotion, but this was so consuming. And so out of context that I would feel this great sense of sadness that I was leaving, that I stood up and took notice, going, this is not me. I don't know why I'm feeling like this. I actually logically don't feel like this, but yet all of the emotions in my body are just devastated that I'm leaving. And that stuck with me from the very first time. And that's another thing that is Sasquatch phenomena. Once you are interacting with this being, the feelings that you have when you interact with it don't leave you. So it's almost like a traumatic experience, where there's one thing to be in, have an experience in your life that's very memorable, and you can remember the sounds and this, and you can retell the story. But usually when I have a Sasquatch experience, I don't really just retell the story. I relive the experience in my body. The cells, even talking about the experience, the very first experience in 2012 in Montana, my heart starts to feel it. I feel that emotion. So that's one of the Sasquatch phenomena. So you go into the forest, you have this encounter, and it's not like you're just telling your friends, you actually relive it. Every part of it. If it's fear, if it's anxiety, if it's happiness or joy. But I'll mostly say that other people that have the experience, for the most part, when they're retelling the stories, it's fear. They become really afraid. And I really understand why they become afraid, because it's not every day you're in the forest and all of a sudden you're being surrounded by a being that has all the power for all intents and purposes, right? I could liken it to the experience of maybe being in the ocean doing some diving, and all of a sudden you're surrounded by sharks. But I'm not saying that Sasquatch are like that, predatory. But I can imagine all of a sudden when you're in that water and you realize that you're not in control anymore. You don't have the power. What's swimming around you has the power. And so the Sasquatch experience is likened to that. Like when you're in it, you're like, I'm not calling the shots here. And I think for someone who's been like a lifelong hunter, that would be very terrifying. And so that's why I think a lot of people that have the experience come away just terrified. And I've had that experience before. I have had the experience of being terrified, but mostly it's kind of hit or miss. But you do realize when you're in the forest with them that you're not the human that you think you are, or we have this idea that we're the apex predator in the forest. And then you soon learn that, oh no, I'm not alone in this forest. I'm not alone.
But it seems to me with certain people that Sasquatch has developed a relationship with, I don't want to use the word chosen. I don't want to make it sound like an elitist kind of thing. But do you feel at some level that, okay, now we know about your colleague you're out in the bush, the field with, it's really you we're interested in. And again, I don't want to paint it in an elitist, stratified sense, but what are your thoughts on that?
Oh no, I'll say an elitist stratified sense. I'm okay with that. I mean, not really like, but more in this sense, they choose you, you don't choose them. And that's what I really feel, because I almost feel too, well, I really do believe this, because I went into the forest with the idea that they were apes, they were Gigantopithecus, right? Like, that's what I believe they were. I'm like, oh, Gigantopithecus did not go extinct. That's what we're dealing with. Because we have them in a biological record, right? We have skeletons. We have a fossil record for Gigantopithecus. So it is the logical assumption, right? And so, but I really feel like that first encounter, they showed up to me as an ape because that's what I believed them to be, right? My mindset was they're an ape. And so my filter kept me from actually experience them as they are, because I already had an idea of who they were. And I really think that the mindset that you go into the forest to will alter your experience in that forest. And I have no evidence to back that, but that is my feeling about that. I feel now, hindsight, after all these years, that the Sasquatch showed up not only because of my energy as an animal lover and my expectation and my hope to have that experience, but I also feel they showed up to protect me. I have no doubt about that. But I really do feel like, and it's not really, I say that word elitist kind of joking, but they choose you. They don't have to make themselves known. You know what I mean? Like, they're smart, they're intelligent, they're capable, they're, from what I can tell, moderately omniscient. They must have a higher vantage point. So, they do have a higher vantage point, but here's where I'm a little bit different. I don't really believe anything is necessary paranormal. I don't like that term, because
it's so limiting. I don't like it either.
Well, and what it does is it takes us out of the game of scientific research, or once you start seeing, so once our culture starts saying paranormal, then you already get delegated to fringe. But if I could take all the criteria, let's say something like an octopus was as an elusive creature as a Sasquatch, and I started listing all the qualities that an octopus has, people would start thinking it was paranormal, right? An octopus can shapeshift. We know this. We have octopus that not only camouflage 100% that you can't see them, we also have octopus that change their body shape. Like, completely changes its body shape so it looks like a different animal, right? So I would rather say, let's study the phenomena that is actually natural, because if I listed off that criteria to an octopus, like, let's say 100 years ago, they wouldn't say that being existed. If I said there was a creature that had 8 brains, 3 hearts, blue blood, and could look like a lionfish, they're like, what? You know what I mean? You know what I'm kind of saying? So, and Mike and I have this dispute all the time, because what I want to do is take this body of evidence we call paranormal and start dropping it into the natural world, because it is naturally what we are experiencing. So Sasquatch have this ability to be sort of omniscient. If they're omniscient, then they have a higher vantage point. And I'll give you an example. If I'm looking at a fish in a pond, right, and the fish has no cognizance of me because of it's trapped by its environment, and I throw a rock into the pond, and the fish swims somewhere else, and I throw another rock at it, it's because of my vantage point. And that vantage point to the fish may seem omniscient and paranormal, but it's not. It's not at all. It's just because I have a different vantage point. The Sasquatch have a different vantage point that I can't understand because I am not privy to their existence. So I would venture to say that they exist in a realm much like I exist in a realm to a fish that it cannot know. I can visit the ocean, but I can't live in the ocean. Just like a Sasquatch can visit our forest, but it doesn't live in our forest. Perhaps. It's the same kind of thing. There's something that the Sasquatch are privy to that our biological structure as a human is not privy to. And just because we're not privy to it doesn't mean that the encounter and the interactions are paranormal. It's just the term we like to use because we can't explain it. And science is afraid of it, right? And it's not science that's afraid of it. To tell you the truth, it's got to be religion that's afraid of it, right? It's religion that doesn't want us to know that we have an angelic, like omniscient being that lives right next to us. Because once we start accepting all of these things that the Bible doesn't really account for, then all of a sudden all the Bible power structure leaves. And science they parlay to each other, right? Once you start saying it, there's a great TV show, and I've used this soundbite before, but there's a show that was on the History Channel for Sasquatch, and there were some great scientists on there, like 5 or 6 scientists. One was Jeffrey Meldrum, and the other was Ian Redman. Now, Ian Redman believes in Sasquatch, 100%. Nevertheless, the premise for the show, all the scientists agreed. They said this one thing. They said, before we begin our talk, we have to agree that whatever we're researching has to be in the biological record. But that's not science, right? Because let's say 100 years ago, if I said octopus had 8 brains, I don't think anybody would believe that. That's a newfound fact that we're not really necessarily like, wow, 8 brains? Like, what has 8 brains? We don't have anything that has 8 brains. And now scientists are discovering about octopus, which is very interesting. And I don't know if you know this, but they're starting to say that the octopi are truly an alien species because their DNA is not like other animals on this planet. So they think maybe octopi could have come from somewhere else somewhere because their DNA is not matching with ours. So point being is that we have this phenomena that they're doing, but it really only seems like paranormal phenomena because we're trying to put it in this shoebox of what we know and what we believe. We can't do that. I don't know of any creature that was watching me that would put this, and even if you want to say there's human interaction, I'll invite any human to go out and find this rock. Please, like, really go out and find this rock, right? So, but again, the term paranormal for me doesn't work. I just think there's all this stuff in our experience, and we have a big body of information about how human works, and we have a body of information how octopus work, but we don't have the body information of what Sasquatch and UFOs, we don't have the body of information of how they work. So we call it paranormal, and the people that have the experience, we call them fringe. And that the powers of be, political, academic, and religious powers actually don't want this information out. They don't, for whatever reason. I can't imagine why. I mean, I think it's an amazing world. Why would we not want to know everything that's going on around us?
Oh, yeah. Well, we're nearing the end of the first segment. It's been a fascinating segment. Thank you so much for sharing, Sonia.
Uh-huh.
In the next segment, if you feel so inclined, I'd like you to talk about the interactions in Canada with the group that Mike Patterson interacts with, because that takes it to a whole nother level. I mean, you've already described things that take it to another level, but what Mike has been experiencing and what you validated also in your research, going over there, in spite of the interference from all these Bigfoot research organizations, let's say, that want to keep everything.
I'd be happy to talk about it. I'll just put this out right now. All the people that talk Mike, they're just wrong. You just got to, yes. I personally I didn't experience what I think was quote Neff. I personally didn't get that feel for it, but he definitely has interaction. I mean, we had interaction right away. So yeah. And big interaction too, but we can talk about that.
Well, we've reached the end of a fascinating segment with Sonia Zohar. Sonia, excuse me, they've been having all these fires in Australia, and it's affected the asthma, makes it difficult to talk sometimes. Oh, it's quite all right. We've had such smoke, palls of it, just lying low in the atmosphere here. Nothing to laugh about. But anyhow, is there a way for people to contact you, or do you have a Facebook or a website that you'd like to share?
You know, thank you so much for that. And I really don't. And I will. I know a lot of people want to talk to me, and I it's not that I'm trying to hide. It just has to do with that thing that people really attack you about this
Yes, yes.
information. And so I fly pretty low. I do my research. I do everything. I talk to people. I do conferences, but websites and whatnot. I just, even on the BFRO channel, you know, I had death threats in the comments,
Yeah.
and
This is supposed to be a research organization about Bigfoot, folks. BFRO, I've heard about them years now. They're just,
yeah,
but yeah, understandable. And the fact that you can do all this stuff, be in the forefront in the field, but still slide under the radar, speaks volumes about you as an investigator and as an individual. Well, we've reached the end of a fascinating segment with Sonia Zohar. If you like what we do, if you believe in what we do here at the Cosmic Switchboard Show, please go to our website, thecosmicswitchboard.com, sign up and become a member, and we'll see you at the top of the next segment. Hello again, everybody. This is James Bartley, and you're watching and listening to the Cosmic Switchboard Show. In the first segment, you heard our very special guest, Sonia Zohar, talk about her experiences becoming involved with Sasquatch research, the journey she's taken and taking, and we're going to delve more into this, the metaphysical aspects of the Sasquatch research, which has basically been ignored or intentionally obscured by certain segments within the Bigfoot research community. So without any further ado, Sonia Zohar, welcome back to the Cosmic Switchboard Show.
thank you so much.
Sonia, a big part of your research, because you and we believe in following the evidence trail, and I believe that it's not scientific to intentionally dismiss out of hand or ignore certain facets of this Sasquatch research, which is part and parcel of it at a very deep personal sense. You have personally experienced let's say, the metaphysical aspects of the Sasquatch experience. And on the other hand, you know from personal experience that there are elements, long-standing elements within the Bigfoot research community that are doing their level best to marginalize, debunk, and even harass, to the point of harassing Sasquatch researchers who know about the metaphysical aspects of Sasquatch. So would you like to talk about first those groups, those institutions, if you will, that are trying to keep the metaphysical aspect under wraps, and then talk a bit about what you've experienced on a metaphysical level?
Sure. I can't really it's a very strange and odd phenomena, this idea that people would want to thwart anybody's efforts. I've never really understood it. And that is why I fly under the radar. I don't really talk a lot. I don't really write a lot. I don't publish a lot. Because there are people humans that will, and organizations like the BFRO that will come after you and call you a hoaxer for whatever reason, and I don't really understand it. I think it's an odd thing that somebody would have that much time and energy to, instead of, forwarding your own research, you actually spend more time trying to disparage, that's the word, somebody else's research. And in this genre, we have both groups of people. And the last conference I was at, someone asked the question, do you believe there's a conspiracy to keep this information out? And if so, who would be doing it? Well, honestly, I don't like to believe that there's this big conspiracy and these people watching out for you. But the truth is, the Sasquatch and Bigfoot researcher groups, and in the UFO too, have just as many people trying to make this information seem ludicrous, hoaxed, and not true as there are people who are trying to share their experiences. And I'm not sure what's so upsetting if I'm just sitting here sharing you my personal experience of what I've experienced. I'm not trying to make any sort of great grand theory we just spoke about, how do I think they communicate? Well, I don't really know. I know what I've experienced when I've gone out. And I'm really just wanting to share what I've been experiencing in the forest in this topic. However, I really think the people who are trying have a concerted, organized effort to attack people doing the research. Those are the people I think are the conspiracy. That's who they are. Who else has time, energy, and money to make a whole YouTube channel to attack me as a human being? And we had spoken earlier about Mike Patterson and what's going on in his area. And there is a human being that has that type of time, energy, and effort. And right now, his YouTube channel is being taken down by that same person. So it's fascinating. I don't really understand it. I actually don't. Although it just seems that people don't want, there is a group of people who do not want us to know that Sasquatch exists and these paranormal beings exist and these UFOs exist and they're visiting us. They have been forever. They don't want to know about contact. And I was thinking about it today. Science should be at its best. When you're researching something and you get new information, you should be elated about that information to expand and a constant expansion of what we know. But science right now is not that at all. Science is, this is the bubble you get to work within. And if you want to work outside of it, we're not going to work with you. And this research is much like that too.
It seems to me that a lot of those gatekeeping organizations, BFRO, folks, stands for Bigfoot Research Organization, and I've heard stories about them being not just a hindrance, but an outright nuisance harassment organization for some time now. And it seems to me that similar to the UFO field, where they want to keep everything at a lights in the sky level, these old school researchers, they want to dismiss out of hand the encounters that people have, and that's frankly where the rubber meets the road in Sasquatch research as well as in UFO research. And I do believe at some level there's some interlinkage between the two. What aspects of your work you feel has run afoul of them, which they take extreme umbrage towards?
Well, first and foremost, the fact that I can contact them.
Yes.
Right off the bat, and I would, what would be hard for people, and I would understand it too. I'm not going to mention any names, but there are people who've been in this field for 30 years and never had an encounter. They've been doing work for 30 years and they're credible and they're authors and they tour and they conference and they talk. But if you ask them if they've ever had an encounter, they haven't. So I would think that at some point there's a bit of jealousy in that realm. And for some reason, some people, I think what they think is that they're studying this biological creature. And the people who are admitting to this other, let's say they're a person who is studying it as a biological creature, but they're also not going to be privy to the experience. We've already established that Sasquatch choose us, we don't choose them. Bottom line, you could go out in the forest your whole life. And that's why we have a discrepancy of information anyway, from the get-go. Ooh, I got a little tickle in my throat. But what I was going to say is that you have, let's say you're a hunter your whole life and you've been going in the forest your whole life and you never have the Bigfoot experience. You really don't believe they exist. And I understand that. I understand there are men or women hunters who have been hunting a territory for 40 years and know every part of the forest. And they never have the experience. They never have the encounter, so they don't believe. So I understand that. And then there's someone like me who goes out one time with the intention to have this experience, and boom, it's right there. So I can understand that rub. If you don't have the experience and you don't have any sort of sense of it, then you're not going to be a believer. I mean, I wasn't a believer. And I've never in my life been someone who doesn't necessarily believe in things. I've never had an issue with UFOs. It's logical, it's scientific to me. If you look out and you see 25 billion stars like our own sun, you're going to have to imagine that life is somewhere else. Whether or not they're visiting was never, I didn't really care about that. I was like, oh, maybe they are, maybe they're not. I'm not really attached to it. It's interesting and fascinating. Same thing with ghosts. We all know, everybody I know has had a ghost experience. You know, you could be at Thanksgiving and someone's going to be a diehard, no, there's no such thing. And then they get you in the kitchen and they go, okay, one time at Grandma Jake's house or Grandpa Jake's house, you know? So I think, especially when a new term came out when 9/11 happened, and it's called cognitive dissonance. And it's when your belief system is so strong that outside information, your brain won't process because your belief system is so strong that you resist the bubble of information that you've created for yourself. And if you're not like an empath, and if you don't really like nature to begin with, all of those things could seem really spooky. And then if you're really embedded in the Western religions, you're going to start to believe that that's Satan and devil, and then you're going to get afraid of it, you know? So it's fascinating, all of it. But I think a lot of it has to do with, even in the Sasquatch world, we have a lot of cognitive dissonance. And then we have upsettedness. Because if I'm talking with a group of researchers and you've been in the field for 30 years and you're finding tracks and tree breaks and all this stuff, and then I'm talking to one, that doesn't set well with you. Like, what do you mean? You can't be talking to one, you know? And I've had that too. But then, unfortunately, you know, in this group as well, we do have some people who actually fabricate and make things up and hoax. And they're, you know, there are people that go out and do that and say that, and they want to feel connected to this group, or they want to feel connected to a genre of an experience. And so, you know, they want to say, yeah, I have 6 of them living in my backyard. I don't know. It's challenging, but ultimately what we're dealing with, you and I as alien researchers, as paranormal researchers, really what we're always up against are people's belief systems, nothing else. The experience is happening. The experience has been happening for thousands of years. You know that you see it we see cave writings and petroglyphs of flying saucers, of things that look just like flying saucers. And the Nazca lines, did you know that they started using this thing called LADAR, LADAR?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
So LADAR is this kind of technology. I don't quite understand how it works. I can't even imagine how it works. But they can shoot down into the earth and see the layers before underneath civilization.
I didn't know the acronym for it, but yes, I'm familiar. I'm aware of it, yeah.
They've been using that on the Nazca Lions, and they found that hundreds more of those glyphs that only you can see from above, and beautiful ones. And one of them that I saw actually looks like what we comically draw as an alien, like spot on. One of them looks like Cocopelli, you know, and this is down at Nazca in Peru, and Cocopelli is all the way up in the southwest of the U.S.
Cocopelli, you know, being who's Cocopelli?
Cocopelli is one of the from the indigenous culture around Sedona. Cocopelli was their god of music. He was, I want to say he's a god of, like a Dionysiac kind of god.
A Bacchanalian Dionysus type.
Yes, yeah. He's always pictured with the flute and dancing. And there is this petroglyph. I don't think you call it. It's not a petroglyph when it's from the air, but I can't think of the name of it. But it's spot on Cocopelli.
Wow.
Thousands of years apart, thousands of miles apart. But again, you know, in all of this, we're just up against people's belief systems. And humans, that's why we are the most dangerous creature on the planet, because we will do things based on a belief system that can be very, very false. We believe in false narratives. And we don't check our narratives, right? We don't check them. Nobody really looks at the narratives that are going on around them and ask whether they're true or not. We just buy into them. And I'm not really sure why this, to me, I don't understand. Why wouldn't you want to know all the things? We came into this time-space continuum called Earth. Why would you not want to know everything that was around you? And why would you fear it? You know, and that's a lot of what Western religions teach you, is to not be in contact with nature and to fear it. But I don't really believe, and it's oxymoronic to their own spirituality. It is oxymoronic to their own religion that a creator God would put you in a place that you're supposed to fear. That doesn't make any sense.
Yes, it is. And the malign influence of the church, which baffles me, but it still holds sway over the hearts and minds of countless people, despite the exposure of so many of these predatory priests of theirs. The fact that they would systematically go and just eradicate native peoples the world over and do away with their historical record. I mean, think of what they did with the Mayans and others, and just loot it of whatever artifacts or gold they could find, and just leave a wasteland behind. So that's what their religion has done.
Well, and you know what? And if you want to ask me about if I have any conspiracy theory, that's the one I would want to know. Why is it that there is a sect of humanity that is committed, mobilized, and continually desecrating indigenous cultures on this planet? And it's every culture. China's doing it right now. Russia's doing it. The U.S. is still doing it. The U.S. is doing it all over. The Catholicism is doing it. Time and time again, you have all of these structures, Have you ever thought about that whole notion? Why do you need to go save somebody's soul? Why don't you leave their soul alone? Right? They are orchestrated, organized, and it's the constant desecration of indigenous culture on this planet. And that, to me, is probably the biggest conspiracy. Like, I want to know why. Why are humans continually denying indigenous culture? When in essence, we had to be at core, all of us, indigenous culture. There is a movement within humans to desecrate that part of our knowledge constantly. And it's all to take it away from the earth, You don't trust the earth. You don't eat off the earth. Look at how many people are afraid of organic food. Like, organic food is like some weird thing to them. My grandma's of that. She can't understand why I eat organic. And I'm like, Grandma, that just means I want my food off the earth the way it is. I don't want them to spray it with somebody. And she thinks I'm weird because I eat organic food. She has it in her mind that you have to get it from a farm that sprayed it for it to be edible. When the earth, that one saying is true. The earth can provide for every single need, but it cannot provide for greed.
Yes.
And it does. All the medicine we need to heal, all the, even in the biblical scriptures where they talk about people living for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? Well, I think that's true. I think humanity probably did live a long, long time before we started alcohol, before we started taking poisons for medicines. Look at how diseased humanity is right now, especially in the United States. And we got more drugs than we got as many drugs as we have humans. And the medical community, I don't know why people keep trusting and buying into that. The earth will provide. It has for millions of years. So, hey, did you know about, and then just discovering, no mistake, do you know about Göbekli Tepe?
Yeah, in Turkey.
Yeah, in Turkey. Well, it's right there on the border of Syria where they're bombing right now, and ISIS is going around destroying all these temples. Right?
Yes. ISIS is a controlled intelligence asset, but you see also what the Taliban have done, another controlled intelligence asset. You look at what the Khmer Rouge have done, likewise. They just go around in Cambodia, Kampuchea, go around systematically destroying statuary. Like what's gone on in the former, Samaria, former Babylon, systematically bombing the ziggurats, systematically destroying the statuary, the cuneiforms. It's an attempt to just completely wipe the slate clean, Sonia, of our history. And please.
Okay. I was saying, and Göbekli Tepe, the writings on the carvings on the walls, they actually had astrological information. And the most amazing thing about Göbekli Tepe is it was there right after the Ice Age. And whoever built it spent as much time, energy, and effort to bury it. Göbekli Tepe was purposefully buried to preserve it. And it happened at the Ice Age before, so humanity was supposedly able to build anything. It was pre-pottery, according to academia, right? So there was a highly intelligent life, and temples like Göbekli Tepe actually were found as far into the east as like Spain, I believe. I could be wrong. It may have been Italy, but somewhere it had come up into the Mediterranean where they have temples just like it. And we know nothing about them, but they were not destroyed. They were buried. So something wanted that preserved.
Yes, that's one thing that I read in the recent past, that there's so much of it that's still unearthed, that's still buried. I mean, this is news to me that it was buried intentionally. That makes, excuse me, that makes perfect sense.
I know, and only 20% of it as we know right now. But that temple is sitting right on the border of Turkey and Syria, where the Kurds are.
Yes.
And matter of fact, it was a Kurdish shepherd who found Göbekli Tepe.
Yes.
You know, so there's no mistake that the U.S., for whatever reason, and Turkey and whatever ISIS really is destroying those sites.
Well, we see even before the second invasion of Iraq, what was it, March 2006, that before that occurred, special units, Tomb Raider types, went in to the Baghdad Museum and other places and looted them of all of these priceless artifacts once again. So it's like, well, we're not only going to devastate this place and just, keep the oil capped, but we'll divide it up amongst the corporations. We're going to loot all the stuff in the museums and all these artifacts and whatnot. So there's some thought behind all this. And and the thing about the Sasquatch is, it's a living institutional memory amongst the Sasquatch tribes. They've lived in harmony with the earth all this time. A perfect example for us, right, to get back to our roots, which they've systematically tried to destroy with all the eradication of all these indigenous peoples. And so when you look back, the further back you go, not only was humanity, especially outside of Europe, but in Latin America and elsewhere, not only were people really in tune with the environment, but they were also acutely aware, as were the people in Europe for that matter, of all the indigenous life forms, including the hairy hominoids and other what we would now call cryptids. So in the old days, it was a given. Oh yeah, they're out there. They're in the woods. If you don't mess with them, they won't mess with us, or whatever the case may be. But now, because of this systematic denial and obscuration, if that's a word, of all this stuff, to this day, unbelievably, Bigfoot, Sasquatch research is still relegated to the fringe. And then you add that element you just spoke about, Sonia, where there are these institutions deliberately seeded into the mix that's harassing researchers such as yourself who are making real progress and pushing the envelope on this thing, and like Mike Patterson also in the trials and travails he's going through. Now, would you mind commenting on what you found out when you went out to work with Mike Patterson? He's out there in the woods of Ontario, Canada, and he's been on the show a couple times talking about his experiences.
Well, many things happened out there. Like I mentioned earlier, the whole crystal thing. I mean, I'd just forgotten about that until we talked about it. So the first time I went out there, we went camping, and I'm very big on leave no trace. Obviously, you can tell I love the earth. So there was no trash. There was no trash around our site. I would have noticed. I really would have. I would have picked it up. That's what I do when I'm in the forest. If I see someone's trash, I pick it up. And anyway, so we'd spent the night out there, and a rock just was thrown. That we were right by a lake, and this rock was thrown right in the water by us, which was very interesting, and didn't see where that came from. And that was kind of the only thing that happened that evening. It kind of felt like a bust. We didn't really hear anything in the night. Nothing really happened. And then when we got out of the tent in the morning, right in front, like right when I stepped out of the tent, was a plastic fork. And it was not only a plastic fork, but it was neon green. So I know that was not there before, anywhere in the campsite before. And so that was very interesting. And then I took that as a sign that, yeah, something came around, right? And so that's when I decided to leave. I actually left 3 crystals there. 2 that I had brought to leave there, these really beautiful crystals. And what I was hoping, I left them, they were really small. I was hoping, because Mike has that experience with the marbles and things manifesting, my intention was that I would leave that and maybe he would find it later, you know, in his research in another place. That was my intention. Or maybe they might show up at my house back in California. And so I left these 2 beautiful little crystals. And then I had this one big crystal. And when I was there that night, or somewhere in transit, maybe while I was traveling, or I don't know, it cracked. And it split in 2 crystals. And so I decided to leave it because I've been told, and I don't know if this is true, but when the crystal does that, it's done. Like, it's time here. It's saying goodbye. It's death for the crystal, I guess, in a spiritual sense. And again, I don't know that's true. I've just heard that. So I thought, wow, it's discharged. It just left. So I'll leave it. That was the crystal. One of the pieces, the bigger part of that crystal that I specifically hid that in a bush. I hid all the crystals, and I did not tell Mike. I didn't tell him. And we got back to his place, and he was unpacking back in the Toronto area, and we were way up north by the Algonquin. And he gets back to his house, and he starts unpacking his camera stuff, and he goes, "Oh, here's your crystal." Like giving it back to me like I had just left it, like I had put it there for safekeeping, you know, like you would anybody. "Oh, hey, here's your crystal." And I'm just looking at him like, I didn't put, I'm still stammering over it because what? You know? So that happened. The other 2 crystals I never saw again. I had, like I said, I had that really hoping that I made them small enough, and I thought, could you just teleport this somewhere and just let me know? But that didn't happen. And then the other thing, so that was the first time I was out at Mike's. And then I went out again. We rented a cabin in the area, and in Neff's area. When we walked into the cabin, right away I heard something say Mike, like Neff would, like I had heard through his audio. It was like, Mike. And I was like, I thought Mike was online. I thought he'd played something, and then I walk into the other room and he's just sitting there. There was no, you know, and we just rented the cabin, so he hadn't been there before. There's no way he could have, like, I'm like, "Did you just play like audio?" He's like, "No." And I'm like, "Okay, that's interesting." And I shared with him what happened. And that we went out every night that we were there. And the biggest thing I would say in Sasquatch stuff happened to me there, the biggest experience, the most impactful, and I'm not going to lie, it was the one that actually made me afraid. You know, it gave me that sense of like, whoa. So my first colleague that I ever worked with, he used to like always tell me, "Sonia, I just want you to know that if one of them gets a hold of you, I cannot track it. I cannot kill it. You will be gone. Do you understand that?" And I'm like, you know, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, it's like telling somebody some area is dangerous. You're like, okay, you're not there. And then until someone shoots at you, you're like, okay, yeah, this area is really dangerous. Right? You know? Anyway, so I just took it with a grain of salt. And then I was in Mike's territory. And, but that was always in the back of my mind. And that's why I told you that story earlier when I noticed the distance, why I was present to that distance, because it was him that kept telling me, you know, he told me for years, even before I went in the forest with him, if one gets a hold of you, you're gone. I cannot track it. I cannot kill it. Are you okay with that? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. Anyway, so here I'm at Mike's, you know, and we'd been doing some stuff and some other things had been happening. But one night we went out and we're on this like little snowmobile road, dirt road, and we're sitting down. It's like 3 a.m. in the morning. And Mike had some experience earlier. He said, "Come on, let's go up the trail and do this." Came back to the cabin to get me. And I'd been waiting for late night to go out anyway. So We get out there. It was new moonish. I think there's like a sliver, just a tiny sliver, but you know, in the wilderness, it's really kind of light. It just takes a little bit of moon to have a lot of light. And I was sitting there really like concentrating, looking through the trees and watching like little rifts of fog go through. And I'm just so intense, and I'm just wanting a little bit of movement, you know, just, I want to see something move. And so I'm just sitting there and I'm looking through this, and all of a sudden, from my left came this came this stomping noise, and it went trash, trash, trash. And so I'm going to say, I have to say this to the audience because I've had criticism about this before, that I use the word trash. I'm not even sure why that bugs people, but trash, 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 trash is the sound of crunchy leaves in a forest when you walk on them. I was in the Algonquin area with him. This was in October. So all the fall leaves were there, right? So back behind me, and I'm going to say at least 70 yards. But it came to me in an instant. Trash, trash, trash. And then it stopped behind me. Boom. Trash. And then what scared me was the very last trash. It was very tiny. It was almost as if this thing wanted me to know that it was very far away, very quick, and it left one little noise. So the whole thing went like this, out of nowhere. Trash, 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 boom, trash, trash. Now, here's where it gets interesting. I heard this coming and going. It happened so fast that I didn't have time to move forward. I didn't have time to move my head. I literally was sitting in the same position that it all happened in, and it was done. Whatever that was moved 70 yards, 30 yards, and landed behind me with the impact of a bull in 2 seconds. I mean, trash, 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 boom, trash, trash, that fast. And all I could say, oh, my heart, all I could say was, my colleague was right. My colleague was right. My colleague was right. And then Mike says to me, he looks at Sonia, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm okay. And he said, you know, it's really funny. He goes, I'm surprised you're not running. And then I looked his direction because it's so dark. And I'm like, you can't outrun that. Like, why would I run? And then I was like, my colleague was right. And he's like, what? What was he right about? What, Sonia? And I go, you can't outrun that, and you can't kill that. And that changed my experience. Definitely. It put some things in perspective for me. I went home when I got back to California, and I lived on a country road where the speed limit should have been 45, but most people do 60, you know, country road. And I sat with my back to that road, and a car did not come at me that quickly. Not even close. I could have gotten up and run from cars coming at me 60 miles an hour, right? I could have moved. This thing, my body did not have time to flinch. It just happened so quick, so loud, so impactful, and then gone. And then that last trash, when I realized how far that last trash was and how delicate it was, again, I was like, what? And I knew then also, although I won't let him play it, I don't want him to. It was very specific and very, I just too personal. But after that experience, I kind of feared for Mike, knowing that if I was in the woods with him and something happened, that he would get blamed, and there was no way he could prove otherwise, right? Like, that occurred to me. And even though as terrifying as that was, and crazy as that was, and oh, don't kid yourself if I was not hot to go back in the woods the next night. So I knew I was going back in the woods, even though I was in the state of mind of what just happened. But I literally told Mike, where are they? Like, let's go. I don't want to just sit out on the road right now. Where do you think they are? Let's go. And anyway, but I did call my best friend and I made a video chat because I had no cell signal where we were. And I left this video message for her on her Skype, explaining to her explicitly what I had experienced, that it was a game changer, and that one did get a hold of me, I would be gone and there would be no explanation for it. And I wanted her to know that Mike was telling the truth just in case. That's how intense that experience was. And then the next night we did go out. We went back into the center of their area, and we hung out, and two things did happen to me. I can't really explain them. I don't know what they were, but Mike had asked that one of them touch me. And I had this experience where I felt like something like touching my ear, and it was so gentle, and I couldn't tell if I was imagining sensation in my ear. And I put my hand up and I didn't feel anything, but I knew that something was like kind of just going like this. Then when we left, I got up to walk away, and something grabbed the back of my pants, or like just in the middle area of my body, and pulled me back. And I completely thought Mike was saying, stay for a second, right? And I turned around, and he hadn't gotten up off the bench. Or we were as a log, not a bench. He hadn't gotten up off wherever we were sitting. Actually, I don't know what it was. He hadn't even gotten up. And so so that happened in his area. What else?
Well, those are examples of what physicists are now calling quantum non-locality. It seems that, hold that thought, it just seems that part of what Sasquatch does with people they're in contact with is, they would know, they would personality profile these people, and in fact would even know their lineage to some extent. They would know if certain people were not only receptive to these kinds of clues, but would be able to process it properly. A lot of these nuts and bolts types, they could hear the trash, 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 boom, far away, little trash, and they wouldn't make heads or tails of it. They wouldn't process it because of the filters. Ego is a block to learning. But by showing you the ability to move at that rate, I don't perceive that as linear travel. I mean, they're doing something outside of normal space and time, and likewise their ability to manifest things in midair and whatnot, right? So anyway, the point being that they're showing us that, look, this is what we're capable of. You have to deal with it. But I think part of the hidden message is you guys are capable of doing the same thing. You've just been brainwashed by the church and by scientists and everything else. Because whatever we're capable of doing, you can do it too. I think it's part of the message. But anyway, please continue.
Well, we are, just to add to that, to give you evidence for that, we are a lost species. We're a lost species. We don't know where we come from. We don't know who we are. We're a lost species. And not only that, we don't live inside the parameters of the natural world. Like, we left the garden. We left the garden. We didn't get kicked out. We left the garden. But why? Why did we get left out? Obviously, the indigenous cultures are still in the garden. But this culture is not. It's not in the garden. We got kicked out. Why? How come? You're right. And I think all of those things, I think all of those things are accurate. Everything that you just said. Absolutely. I want to give you a little backstory to the trash, 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 boom, trash, trash. So the night before, but hold on one second. I'm on my, sorry. Okay, we're good. All right. So, are you hearing me?
I'm muted. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. All right, great. All right. So the backstory. The night before, we had been on a different road, and the one thing about Bigfoot people, and Mike included, and it's just funny, and it's just funny. when you're doing the research, a lot of seasoned people, like when you go into the forest with them, they'll tell you anything's Bigfoot. I'm not kidding. I was with a colleague, a friend of a colleague, not my colleague, but a friend of my colleague who does this Bigfoot research, and we heard the train whistle blow off in the miles in the distance, and there was train tracks over there, there was really a train. And so the one gentleman said, "Oh, that was a Bigfoot." And I'm like, that was a train. So there is that part of it. Matter of fact, some of this research, and UFO, it's the same thing. Like if you're a movie producer out there, let me give you an idea. You've got to do a mockumentary on all this stuff because there is some comedy to it for sure. But anyway, the night before, we're on this road, and what I thought and believed in my mind but didn't say to Mike was a deer. I heard this trash, trash, trash boom, and it stopped right in front of us, and then trash, trash, and went off. And Mike goes, "Oh, that's Sasquatch." But the sound of it was so minimal, it could have been a raccoon. It was not anything consequential, not enough for me to say that was a Bigfoot, or a Sasquatch. And Mike was sure. He's like, "No, that's a Sasquatch." And I'm like, in my mind, okay, all right. I'm like, "Oh, that was a deer." And it took me a while to put the two and two together, right? The next night I go out and have that experience. And then after I look back on it, I reflected, I'm like, oh my God, he came back to say that was not a deer. I am not a deer, because the sound pattern and the action was identical. It came down the hill at us, trash, 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 boom, it stopped, and then trash, trash. But it was, like I said, something within the scope of a deer. And that's in the scope of things too. I'll go off on a tangent on that. I'll go back to that. I want to go back to that crack sound that I heard in Montana.
Please do.
Remember that loud crack? My first experience, crack. If you watch The Hunted on David Paulides, there's one hunter that goes missing. And all the hunters said there was only one weird thing that happened that day. Before their father's disappearance, they heard a loud crack. That was not common for that area. They'd never heard it before, and they haven't heard it since. So I'm not saying that Sasquatch take the hunted. I don't believe that. They're different things. But maybe the moving of energy, the opening up of a portal, a different way of moving through nature creates that sound, and Sasquatch may not be the only being that has the ability to do that. I don't believe I don't believe the 411 or Sasquatch, and neither does David Paulides. It's something different.
Yeah, I have my ideas about that too. And there's such vast numbers of people that are disappearing in the woods, and if Paulides' research is to be believed, increasingly in the urban areas, these disappearances are taking place. The Sasquatch have manifested a number of different abilities, and it's kind of funny because we were talking about the nuts and bolts type Bigfoot researchers. Well, if Sasquatch tracks lead to a certain point in deep snow and then they disappear, well, that's a head scratcher right there. Well, where do they go? Okay. Mm-hmm. So, right off the bat, there's some anomalies associated with the research. And again, it's not scientific to discount or dismiss out of hand this stuff. That's not very scientific. It's dogmatic, and that's an ideology what we're dealing with when people want to systematically ignore all that stuff. But give us an idea of the kind of range, the gamut of the types of phenomena you've experienced. Others have talked about having Sasquatch in their dreams. Others have talked about mind speak, some kind of telepathic communication. Mike talks about things manifesting in thin air. I've heard that story before. What have you experienced, personally?
Well, I've experienced, first of all the phenomena that was going on at my house. I've experienced it follows you home, right? I've experienced its omniscience, like for some reason knowing that you're going to be at a certain place at a certain time. How could it possibly know that? There are a group of people who believe in glyphs, and I do too. I've found things that just don't make sense in the forest, like something couldn't fall like that, like structures. So the structure phenomena I've experienced, the glyph phenomena, the gifting phenomena, the mind speak, the times that I have experienced it, it's so bizarre to think that you're actually having that happen. but I would be lying if I didn't say that when I went into that cabin, I heard something like Neff's voice saying, Mike. That is exactly what I experienced. And enough to have me walk out the room going, are you playing audio? And he's like, no, I'm just doing what you're doing. And I had to admit to him, that's exactly what I just heard. So yes, I've had mind speak. And then the shared, the out of context emotion that happens. I've had rock throws. I was in the forest with a colleague and Randy Brisson when we had, and I have this on audio, we had a rock thrown at within 2 feet of Randy and my colleague's head, like literally within 2 feet of them. And I had been walking in front of them, and you know, I do need to take care of something just now. Hold on one sec. Are we going to lose?
Oh, sure thing.
I'm so sorry. I just need to plug the battery in. I'm getting
right.
It's flashing at me. So I've had the rock throw. I've seen lights in the forest. Now I can't say that's Sasquatch. You know what I mean? Like I can't say that, but I've definitely seen lights in the forest that were completely unexplained on many occasions. Some people might want to call them UFOs. I don't know what they were. They were just lights floating. And when Mike and I were in his territory, he said he saw a light flying around me that just wouldn't make itself present to me. It was flying behind me. My way. We experienced lights that night too in a very unusual way. I've seen things glow in the forest. What other Sasquatch phenomena? I've found structures, I've seen tree breaks, I've found tracks, I found all the biological stuff. I've had gifts exchanges. I've had like the crystal appear, you know, in Mike's camera bag. The omniscience, like they kind of know where you are, like how I didn't have that phenomena at my house before Bigfoot. You know, before my Sasquatch experience, I didn't have that kind of phenomena. And all of a sudden I'm having all kinds of phenomena. So there's the omniscience. They know where you are. They follow you home. And what else? What other phenomena? Pretty much everything. I've had vocalizations, tree breaks. I was with Dr. Another one of my favorite evidence.
Hey, Bubby. Hold on, son.
Okay.
Come on, Bubba. Almost finished, Bubba. Come on. All right. Any boom bugs yet?
Ah, that little boo-boo.
Okay, I'm recording now. Oh, we're still recording. Okay, cool. I'll just edit all that stuff out. Yeah, you were talking about the different types of phenomena that you experienced.
Mm-hmm. Even from the very beginning, you know, I have to be honest, you know, like the first experience, like I experienced them fast. Whatever moved through the forest at me came at me with incredible speed. I don't do anything to move in the forest, like my colleague said. The fairy ring showed up twice, even though it was just a joke. You know, it wasn't anything serious. It wasn't part of my research. It was just, you know, some casual relating to another human being. And yet the next day, it's exactly where it led me. And then the out of context emotions. Also, they do use infrasound.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that.
Well, I learned that quite bizarrely from Susan McDonald. So she is a wildlife ecologist out of the University of York. You may have seen her. A lot of people have seen her. She is very much a predominant wildlife handler. Like she's been on Jay Leno, she's been on Johnny Carson. I didn't know the name, but when I saw her, I realized it was very odd that I did recognize her from being an animal handler. And she has 2 research sites in Africa right now. She has an elephant site, she has a chimpanzee site, and she also has a raccoon site in Toronto area. I was at Nordeg, Canada with her, and I was relaying to her the previous experience I'd had in Nordeg, where I went out to confront in the middle of the night. Dr. John Bindernagel and Jeffrey Meldrum witnessed this encounter. I didn't think it was an encounter. All I know is we had late in the evening by the campfire, we had a call off in the distance. We heard a vocalization. And the 2 doctors, Dr. Meldrum and Bindernagel, being wildlife biology experts, they were arguing on which bird that could or couldn't be. It was pretty funny to listen to them. My other colleague knew right off the bat, that's Sasquatch. And I'm sitting there looking, going, I don't know what it was. It was just a strange call in the middle of the night. And then it didn't take that much longer to where the call was right next to where we were camping, but it was still in the tree line. And so my colleague asked me, he's like, is this the middle of the night, new moon, completely dark, and we're in Nordeg? I mean, we had been seeing wolf tracks, grizzly tracks, moose tracks all day long, and he's like, can you confront? And I'm always looking at it going, well, you bought the ticket, take the ride. This is what you came here for. Just walk out into the tree line. And see, there it goes right there. I go right back to that experience, and it's in the middle of my chest, and it's like, it's all the way in my throat. So I go to the tree line, and I start to talk like I normally do, but then I look down, and my knees were shaking. But what was really interesting is I had 5 men behind me, 2 of which had loaded guns. I didn't really feel a threat for my life. I mean, the worst scenario is something jumped out at me and they shot, like it wasn't going to be pretty, but I was going to come home, I didn't really have a lot of fear. I had more trepidation than fear. And so I walk up to the tree line and I start talking, and then I noticed my knees were shaking, and I had to coach myself. I was like, you're okay, Sonia, you're fine. You can just talk. Just talk, like you're okay. And so I did, and nothing happened, and I came back to my seat. And when I came back to my seat in the fire, what I noticed right away that I was exhausted. Like I was just, everything was, I had a hard time breathing. I was so exhausted, and Dr. Meldrum looked at me and he said, Sonia, he goes, that was pretty brave. Are you okay? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. And then he asked for the night vision goggle, and he grabbed the night vision goggles and he looked around that area, and he's gone on record saying that he saw something black running down the trail. He saw something that he would say would match the description of a Bigfoot take off. Now, I was just exhausted, and I had a flight out the next morning, story of my life. And but that night, I went down in my sleeping bag. At around 2 a.m. it hit me like this terror, like this fear, like you cannot believe. And I just got into my sleeping bag and I stayed like this. And even in the morning when I had to go to the bathroom and no one was up yet, I wouldn't go. I was like, I couldn't move out of that sleeping bag until I saw another human. And then finally I saw another human. I got up and I went home, and for 10 days, I couldn't even get off my couch and walk to the front door of my house without losing my breath. And it still hurts in my chest right now talking about it. So I was laying this story to Susan McDonald, and I told her the one thing that seemed so odd to me of all that I experienced and the fear. It took me, like I said, a good 10 days. I actually went to a medical doctor. I thought maybe I might have had a heart attack. I didn't know what was wrong with me. The one thing that was so odd to me was from my knees all the front of my thighs, especially around my knee area, just above your knees, that part of my thigh, it hurt like I had done 2,500 squats the day before. For days, that hurt. And when I told Susan McDonald that, who has had an experience of being charged by a bull elephant in Africa, who was hit with infrasound, she knew right away that I was hit from right. She goes, oh, that's infrasound. That's what does that to your thighs. It creates lactic acid there. You get hit with it. So whatever I had an encounter with in Nordegg that Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum said was a Sasquatch he believed hit me with infrasound. And that happened in Nordegg.
Well, thank you for sharing
can't hear
that.
you.
Oh, yeah, I just had to unmute there.
Sorry.
Thank you for sharing that. The picture, oh, finally you come back. Your image had frozen for a little bit, but we got all the audio of what you shared. Thank you for sharing that bit
Okay.
there about the infrasound because that's important. That people, I think a part of that is kind of a warning to go away, leave the area. That the Sasquatch and perhaps other cryptids manifest. They just have this means to generate this kind of, whether it's low frequency or some other frequency, to make people, paralysis with fear and whatnot, and a compulsion, if they can break free of the paralysis, to leave, right? So anyhow, thank you for sharing that. We've reached the end of a fascinating discussion, and we'd love to have you back, Sonia, and thanks so much for the work that you've done. And,
Thank you.
please give my regards to your colleagues in the field. Let them know that, they'll always have a friend here at the Cosmic Switchboard Show, because we're always looking for the cutting edge information, the information that expands the envelope and takes everything to the next level. So I want to thank you so much for the work that you've been doing and continue to do.
Thank you. Thank you for having me too. Thank you so much.
That's quite all right. And to our dear listeners out there, wherever you may be, whatever you may be doing, have a very pleasant time, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now. Thank you, Sonia.
Oh,